Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. Apologies again for not making a video last week. I was quite occupied attending the live sessions about Wix Studio in the Wix offices of New York City, but I come back with a bounty of knowledge about Velo and the updates and changes that are made to Velo inside of the Wix Studio. So if you want to learn about all that, let's get started. So here I am in the Wix Studio Editor with a brand new site, and if you don't yet have access to Wix Studio, then you can go ahead to their landing page, so that's wix.com/studio, and go ahead and hit join the waitlist. You might have to fill out a short form, and if you're an agency or a freelancer or Wix partner, then you should probably get access pretty quickly. If you are an individual user, a small business, then it might take a little more time, but since Wix is currently doing the live sessions where they're teaching everybody about how to use Wix Studio, I feel like the open access to all users is quite imminent. So go ahead and hit join that wait list and you will likely get access to Wix Studio. And once you're inside of Wix Studio, again, we're going to be talking here primarily about the new Velo related features in Wix Studio. So first of all, let's talk about how to turn on Velo, how to turn on dev mode as it's called in the Classic and Editor X. So that would be done over here on the left. So we have this code panel. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit just so you can see everything a little better. So we have this kind of squiggly brackets over here, and this will open up a side panel with a button that says Start Coding, okay? And once you click that, you will enter dev mode. So that is a little different, just to give you a refresher about the classic editor, which is similar to Editor X in this respect. You go over here, you have a button turn on dev mode. Yeah, but over here inside of Wix Studio, we have that on the side here inside of the code panel kind of squiggly brackets. And once the code panel opens, then you see that there is a significant difference out of the box between the Wix Studio Velo experience and the Classic and Editor X, and that is that the native Wix IDE is on the left side of the screen, and it is not on the bottom like inside of Classic and Editor X. Okay, so they took the the bottom panel, and they moved it to the left. So that's over here. So you're now writing your Velo code over here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of what they've done here. Some people find it a little more friendly because, for example, what you can do is go ahead and zoom out. Okay, and you can also adjust the size of the side panel here and essentially create a situation where your site is almost side by side with your code panel. Okay, so even if you're using one screen, you can have this environment where it's kind of side by side. So you have your entire website here and your code panel here. I hear that. For me personally, as a person that doesn't have great eyes and likes to zoom in a little bit when writing code, it creates a little bit of a problem here because as you can see, I don't really have a lot of space to actually write my code once I'm zoomed in. Whereas in the classic editor, if I'm zoomed in, then I can still really have a lot of control over where I can write my code. Again, these are things that might change, and you should take these all with a grain of salt because towards the end, we're going to be seeing the new Wix IDE, which really creates a whole nother coding environment in addition to this built-in native Wix IDE. So all the changes that have been made here should be taken with a grain of salt because there really is an additional feature added beyond everything that you can see within the Wix editor. So that's a little bit about the new code panel. Otherwise, it works pretty much the same as before. So let's just try adding an element to our screen. I'm going to add in some text. And once we select this text and we open up our code panel, then you can see here on the bottom, we have our properties and events of that specific element, just like we would have before over here on the right side in the regular classic Wix editor or editor X. So let me change this just to be like my text. And then any code that we write would go over here. So we would write, let's say, select my text.text equals something. I'm not going to write anything now, but we're going to see some coding later on once we check out the actual new Wix IDE. So that's a little bit about the code panel, and this is a specific page code. So if I want to switch between the code of different pages, what I'm going to have to do is use the regular page navigation. So if I go over here to pages, I'm going to have to, let's say, add a new page. And let's say I now want to navigate between the code of these two pages. So I have to select the page that I want to edit code on, and then open up the new code panel, and you can see that I'm now on new page. If I want to switch to, let's say, the home page, then I'll have to go to pages and click home, and then go back into the code panel. So this is not optimal in my opinion. But again, it could be a downgrade because of the new Wix IDE. So because the new Wix IDE is going to give us different kinds of access than what we had before, maybe they deemed it not so necessary to have the handy dandy page navigation over here for the different code files. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that they do add it back in at some point, because I don't see a detriment to having all the access that we had previously through the native editor, in addition to what they have added in the Wix IDE. But again, it could be a matter of prioritizing. So that's in terms of navigating between different pages. And this global code might look new, but it's actually something you're already familiar with. This is just the master page.js. So this is the page that allows you to write code that will run on every single page. And that's where you'd write code over here. We have this CSS. So this is something new. I'm not going to elaborate on it in this video. I'm going to have another video later this week which dives deeper into this new CSS feature, which is fully built into Studio, and I think you can also access, for some users at least, in Editor X as well. And this basically allows you to customize your elements using the full power of CSS. Really, really cool and powerful feature. Again, going into it more later this week. Then we get to our backend code, which again has to do with the Wix IDE. You'll see we don't have access to the public and backend files from the native Wix editor. Again, a slight downgrade in my opinion, but could be in light of the access that the Wix IDE gives. Again, we'll take a look at it soon when we go into the new Wix IDE. Databases, okay, so this is what we were used to before, just like what we have over here in the databases section. So we can create collections, we can view our different collection fields, etc. We have packages and apps, which again is the same as what we have over here. And you'll notice that also in the Classic and Editor X, we have this create new app option. If it's not showing for you, then in Wix Studio, this is built in for everyone. And this is essentially going to send you to Wix blocks, where you can create a new block. They're really kind of opening it up to everybody now for, general use. We have the GitHub integration, again, something that was available in Editor X and might even be available in Classic. I have seen it popping up in some of the sites that I've been creating and using. So for some people on some Classic sites, I think that there is currently the option to do GitHub integration. So that's kind of an overview of this Velo code panel in Wix Studio. As you can see, we have most of the sections that we have in the other editors. The only difference is okay, we don't have icons. Instead, we have, verbal indications of what each section is, and we're not given access to the backend and public files, and that's something that we're going to have to deal with inside of the new Wix IDE. So let's hop in and take a look at this new Wix IDE, which I've been talking about this whole time. And we can go either from here, so backend code, or over here from page code, code in Wix IDE. So I'm just going to click right over here, and you'll see that it opens this up in a completely new tab. And while this is loading, this is your time to go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Velo tutorials every week. You can also comment if you have any questions or just, kind of want to comment on the video. So this is the new Wix IDE. If you come from a development background, then this probably looks very familiar to you because it's built in VS Code. VS Code is a very popular IDE, so a program for writing code in all different kinds of languages. And basically what Wix has done is utilize the VS Code UI and built a synchronization between it and the Wix site files. So as soon as you get into the editor, you can see the IDE, sorry, you can see here that you have some pre-built folders and files. I recommend not poking around too much here in this .wix file, at least not at the moment. From what I saw, most of these are read-only files, so you can't really make any changes to these. If you try, then you will just be told that you can't make edits. For example, let's go over here. I'll just try, typing something, and you'll see here, failed to save. You can't make edits to these pages. They're read-only. If you like reading, then maybe you can take a look at them, but at the moment they're not of much use. Otherwise, we have the source file, which is where you're going to be doing most of your coding with regard to your Wix site. And you can see here that in terms of the folder structure, it is built like the folder structure that we previously had in the classic and editor X. And we have our pages files. Okay, so if we open this, then you can see that I have homepage, new page, master page. You'll see that the structure of the file name is first the name that I gave the file in the editor, and then a randomly generated file name that is given by Wix. Okay, so home dot something random dot JS. So you'll want to look kind of in the beginning of the file name for the names that you gave to the specific pages. And what we can do is hop in and make edits to our Velo code just from over here. Okay, so from this new window IDE. So for example, if you remember on our homepage, I added in this text and I called it my text. So I can go over here into the homepage code and select $W, my text, and say .text equals hello world. Okay, and now once this syncs up and everything is saved, if I go into preview mode here, then you can see that it says hello world. Okay, so the same experience that you would have editing inside of writing code inside of the native Wix editor, you have here in this new IDE. Primarily useful if you have two screens, or if you're not particular to kind of seeing the canvas as you're writing the Velo code. So if you're writing kind of more logic code, more backend code, maybe it's not so necessary for you to have your Wix site open at the same time. So this kind of gives a separate coding environment. And the advantage here is that you can really customize this IDE exactly to your liking. Some developers are quite particular in terms of, the different color codes that they have, the font, the size, the formatting, the prettier, everything can be customized just like you would customize your own developer environment. And that's really, I think, the advantage that Wix is trying to go for here. And one other cool thing that kind of happens, I'm not sure if this is a bug or a feature, to be honest, but it's definitely cool, is that you'll see here that I'm still in preview mode. Okay, so I haven't exited preview mode, but if I make a change to my code here, so for example, say, I'm changing, okay, and we let this save and sync up, you can see here that in preview mode, the changes happen even though I haven't exited preview mode and entered again. So typically until now, because we edit our Velo code in the same editor that we edit our site, then we would have to exit preview mode in order to edit our Velo code. But now, because the IDE is external, I can essentially edit my Velo code while I'm viewing the site in preview mode. So this is kind of cool because it gives a more simultaneous experience, more like if you were kind of writing React code and it was, appearing in your site automatically, if you were running kind of a server refresh every time you made changes to a file. That's more this kind of experience. Again, I'm not sure how much thought went into this and if this was like a real feature that they had planned, or this is just kind of a side effect of the IDE being separate. But really, because you have the console here as well, like if I just write here, you know, console.log hello world, it'll show in the console log without me needing to kind of exit preview mode, enter preview mode. You see it just kind of came up as soon as the kind of the sync went through between the IDE and the website. So I think this opens up a door to some potentially cool stuff. But yeah, just something that I've noticed when I was playing around here with the IDE. So that is the individual Velo pages. And this code syncs to the native Wix editor. Okay, so everything here is synced up. So you see I make a change in the IDE, it appears here in the editor. And if I make a change here, I can't because it's read-only if the IDE is open. But if I were to close the IDE and make a change here, then that would reflect the next time that I opened up the IDE. So that is a little bit about the pages. We have the master page as well, just like before. And we have our public and backend files. So in order to add in files, you just click right over here. Again, you kind of have to learn a little bit about VS Code and how it works, but it's not too complicated if you're just using the basics. And I could just say, utils.js, and now I have a new public file. And I could do the same thing for the backend. Here in the backend, there's also this permissions.json. To be honest, I'm not sure 100% how it works yet. If I'm not mistaken, this is in order to assign the different permissions for your JSW files, which is something that you would have typically done through the editor before. I'm hoping that this is well documented inside of the Velo documentation, but yeah, this is something that's still a little black hole for me that I need to do a little more research on. But otherwise, inside of the backend files, you can just add in, for example, test.jsw. You can write out your backend functions, you can fetch from your third-party APIs, and import that into your on-page Velo code. Except for that, we also have styles. Okay, this has to do with the CSS feature, which again, I said we're going to touch on a little more later this week, sorry. And last but not least, I want to show you one of the cooler features that they have integrated here into the IDE. And this is going to be really good for those people who might be on the newer side to coding and Velo, but also to more seasoned devs. That is the Wix AI Assistant. So essentially, it is an AI assistant that can help you write Velo code. So it's an AI library built on OpenAI, just judging by this kind of disclaimer here on the bottom. So it's using, the GPT, and if I'm not mistaken, they probably built out some kind of vector database with lots of Velo context that is provided to this AI assistant when you ask it a question. So you can do three things with this AI assistant. You can generate code, you can fix code, and you can look up documentation. So let's just give an example of generating code. So let's say write a query that will search the collection for people whose birth date is earlier than 2 years ago. I don't know, some random thing. So you have some kind of requirement, some kind of code that you want to write, and you can write it in here. Try and have correct English as much as possible. And then the AI will take its time to generate the response. This can take about a minute, no, like maybe 30 seconds. So there are ups and downs to this, and if you're quite adept at writing Velo code, it might have been easier for you just to kind of write that stuff out. But if you want to go and generate your own code snippet using the AI assistant, you can try it out as well. This is also another great chance for you to hit like for the video or comment or subscribe. So once it comes back, so you'll see it comes back with kind of like an explanation of what's going on. And if you scroll down, then you'll get a code snippet. Okay, so you'll see here that first it provides a JavaScript code snippet for getting the date 2 years ago. And you have two options here. So you can either copy and paste, And you also have the option to insert. And insert will just put the code wherever your cursor is. So if I just go over here and I click insert, then boom, it'll put the code right over here. Okay, so I see there was like kind of a repeat here, so I'm just going to get rid of these 2 lines. And let's take a look at this code and kind of evaluate it and see what it's doing and if it makes sense. So we're importing Wix data, definitely makes sense. You're going to need that for Wix query. We're getting the date of 2 years ago. Overall looks correct. And then we are getting, okay, we're querying the people data set. So I didn't, collection, sorry, I didn't tell it the name of the collection, so it just assumed that it's called people. And it assumed that my field is called birth date, which I might have said to it. Let's see. People whose birth date. Okay, so it assumed that the field is birth date, and then it using um, the less than condition or filter in order to only get results where the birth date is less than 2 years ago, i.e. earlier than 2 years ago. And then it find and then .then with the results. So overall, this code would work, assuming that my collection was called people and that the field was called birth date. So that's pretty good for AI. Again, you would need that kind of basic knowledge of the code to know that you would need to change these 2 things in order for your code to work. So I don't think that this is a solution for people with zero Velo knowledge at all. But if you have some basic Velo knowledge and you want to either kind of not write all the code and try and generate as much code as possible, or you want to try and see what the AI creates in order to inspire you and kind of show you different thought processes of writing code, then that's definitely a great option. The fix code can also be really cool. Before I head into that, just notice that you have 2 follow-up questions. So after you get the initial result, you have the option to write 2 more questions to kind of refine the question or make something more specific or add code to it. And then you would have to go back and write a new query. That might just be something temporary, but for now they're restricting it to kind of chains of 3 questions. If you want to go back, so you can click here on the home, and then it'll take you back to this home page where you can select something else. So let me just try and, you know, let me get rid of this .find, let's say. Okay, so I have a Wix query and then I have .then, and for some reason this isn't working for me. So what I can do is I can go fix my code, and I can either copy the code and paste it over here, or I can actually select the code that's not working, and then go right click, scroll down, and then Wix AI Assistant fix code. Awesome. So now we have to tell it what kind of problem or error we're having, and I'm just going to say query isn't running. And let's see if it can identify what the issue is with my code and help me fix it. So this can be quite helpful, especially if you're not so adept at debugging. I think this is something that would be quite easy to solve just by taking a look at the code. But then again, why not use an assistant if you have one? And we see here that it did find that after defining a query, you need to call the find or run method in order to, I'm not so sure about the run method, but definitely find is what's missing here. And they also add in the corrected code snippet. Okay, so it works. I've been playing around with it quite a bit, and I've definitely encountered situations where it does something that in the AI kind of lingo is called hallucinations, where basically it kind of just makes up an answer. It doesn't want to disappoint you, quote unquote, so it'll just make something up completely random just to give you an answer to your question. So that definitely can happen as well. But overall, I've seen it work with like more complex things like query, as well as, simpler things like creating a toggle button or something like that. So this is another really cool addition to the Wix IDE, which is part of the new Studio release that is definitely worth taking a look at. So just to kind of recap and summarize what we've talked about until now. So we took a look at all of the changes to Velo, mostly in terms of the how we write our Velo code and not what we write. So the Velo code itself is the same Velo code. So the same syntax, the same way that you would select elements, the same way that you would interact with the different APIs. There are, I think, some new cool APIs that have to do with the different interactions that we have here, for example. But overall, it's the same Velo code, just where we write it has changed quite a bit. So we talked about this new kind of code panel layout, uh, the fact that it's on the side and not on the bottom. We talked about the fact that we're writing a lot of our backend code and public code, and sometimes even our page code inside of the new Wix IDE, as well as some new features that they've added in over there. The open ticket that we still have that I owe you is talking about the new CSS feature, so tune in on Thursday if you want to hear more about that. And that'll be all for today. If you like this video, please don't forget to like the video and comment, and feel free to subscribe to the channel. Sometimes I do videos like this, but a lot of my videos are more practical Velo tutorials where we actually learn how to code different things and solve different problems in Wix. So if you're interested in stuff like that, I would definitely hit subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.